But what I would say is, I guess, in a kind of positive segue to end this episode, like, is there anything that could be done? Because I know you're part of committees, right? We didn't really touch on that shit at all. This shit got crazy. Is there a way to address these kind of what seems like systemic issues with family court?
Look, what I've described here, I think what we both described is really like the things that go wrong.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
The vast majority of the time, people like myself,
we're
like
doing,
him, we do the right work, right? We go in there, we deal with the bad lawyer, we have the negotiation, right?
I got you.
Like we work it out, we figure out a settlement, we figure out the custody situation. Look, most of your clients aren't having 6 kids with different women. They have one woman who has their first kid, and the next woman they're more selective and they keep those kids, right? Like, sometimes you can work it out with the partner, right? Maybe a girlfriend. You agree to a support arrangement that's not based on the 17%. The man provides a little more here and there, and you work it out. Like, people can be human to each other.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about family court. It's not criminal court. Right, we're not bound by the state's version. The lawyers and the humans who are suffering the reactions are in there working it out and trying to make a difference. And I think that's really what matters: making sure that the people involved are human about it.
Yeah. Is that easier said than done, or is that something that for the majority, except for certain cases,
it's easier because people are at a low moment in their life. Family breakdown is not easy, so it does bring out the worst in a lot of people.
Yeah. Look, I will say that there's a lot of fear and anxiety in victims of abuse, right? And I deal with a lot of them, and whether they're men or women, and so sometimes they are not willing to stand up for themselves, and they're not willing to go for the long fight for their children. That really bothers me personally. I mean, look, I would fight for my kids, right? I want my kids, and I think that the desire to have your family without having lost everything is driving. So my belief is when I look at a client, I take their goals and their emotions into account. I have to remember that half the time I'm dealing with people who are really not in control of their feelings. Maybe they're feeling very sensitive. Maybe even a little bit of disagreement overwhelms them. Right? Whether they're a man or woman, sometimes I'm dealing with people who are always on the verge of crying. Yeah. And I have to be really sympathetic and really supportive, and I have to be able to take their emotions, measure them, and then use them constructively with opposing counsel, who oftentimes is representing somebody who is lying to them about what's going on, who's an abuser, who's maybe dangerous, who doesn't want to pay anything for his child, but wants the child just to make someone suffer. Right? That happens all the time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Woo! So what we do is, right, we act like the adults in the room, and we police the children who sometimes approach things in a way that is childish, right? And sometimes that's people who are on the other side of the phone line, and sometimes it's the person that they're representing.
Yeah, I mean, if those were cautionary tales, I would say maybe we're talking about 20% of the problematic cases, because that's what you remember. Yeah. But I do have a few proposals that I've seen that could fix our family court system. For example, one, a presumption of joint physical custody. In Pennsylvania, they have the joint presumption. So if you go, they'll give you 50-50 unless you ask for it differently, right? So because what I see in New York, it incentivizes family breakdown because that's when you get paid. If you have the child 51% of the time, you get the child support. Instead of maybe making a joint account where both people put on their pro rata share and you use from that, the custodial parent gets the money, they don't have to give you a report, they don't have to give you nothing. So there's a few things you can tweak to make the system better. As to the orders of protection, I think they must have an obligation to call the respondent and say, sir, this is what they're saying, even with a phone call or a virtual appearance, whatever it is. What do you have to say? And sometimes they can have exculpatory evidence that is undeniable. So there's a few ways to do it. I think as to alimony and spousal support, which we didn't talk a lot about, is maybe make a requirement that the person actually try to work or try to go to school or something like that. Currently there isn't, which the incentives are just misaligned a lot of times.
Now,
But there is
would that
also a
be-
limit to how much alimony they can get, right?
Correct.
Like
It's
if you're in a
also
relationship
by
for 3
formula.
years, you
Yeah.
can't.
There's
You're
a
not going to
formula.
pay more than 12 months of
It's-
alimony.
Is that considered divorce court?
No, this,
You
this
can
can
get
this can be
spousal
done in
support in
family
family
court,
court.
but a lot of times that's usually part of a divorce proceeding.
Yeah,
Before we cut off,
yeah,
I'm confused.
yeah.
How can you get spousal support in family court?
Everything except divorce you can do with the family.
Look, there is definitely an issue if people are still legally married.
Okay.
We're still legally married.
Uh-huh.
You kicked me out of the house.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
You kicked me out of the house and you want an order of protection.
Okay.
I have our child or you have our child. I want to be home.
Yeah.
You're suing me for spousal support. You're suing me for child support, but you don't want to pay. You don't want to get a divorce. I think that's part of your defense. You go. They're asking. She's asking me for support. Instead, we should be married and living our lives.
You can try to consolidate case in a divorce action. Like a lot of times you can pull it from the family court.
I think you definitely lose something in a case if you argue. I don't want to get the divorce, but I want the money.
Yeah.
Like I think that definitely you lose something for that.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely a defense. You can use it, you can argue it, but most of the time, what you're going to find is if somebody's asking for spousal support, they're also doing a divorce action. A lot of times, people ask for spousal support before they start the divorce action because they don't have any money.
Yeah.
And they can get that through family court?
So, sometimes people will contact you, like lawyers will contact you and be like, "Hey, you represent so and so. We want to know if he'll give us $30,000 so she can sue him for divorce."
All right. I mean, divorce court. We're next episode.
That could be a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. I could imagine.
The nightmare continues.
head partner of my firm,
That's what it is. Nightmare continues. Well,